cost approach, a sales comparison approach, and an income approach. In all three of those approaches, sales of property is heavily involved. The cost approach is reproduction cost new less depreciation. We use Marshall Valuation Service, which is pretty much universally used by all appraisers. It's a national cost service. It has local multipliers to Virginia Beach and current multipliers, and it is integrated into our assessment software, ProVal. It determines cost per square foot based on the size, shape, height, materials, construction grade, and quality of the property. It estimates physical depreciation based on its remaining economic life. Additionally, there is obsolescence in some buildings called functional, and that means the property just doesn't function well anymore. An example might be our older 7-Elevens don't have restrooms. Things of that where the property just doesn't function based on today's climate. Economic obsolescence is obsolescence that affects the property from outside the property. An unsightly property next door, a junkyard or something that the owners can't control. And in this approach, you still have to determine land value. This is the Marshall Valuation Service. This is the book format. It's a little more clear to see. You pick the grade of property. We're looking at a discount warehouse. It's quality of construction, whether it was a block, wood frame, steel building, and it kind of goes through some of the amenities and gives you a per square foot rate. This is what it looks like when it comes out of our software up in the upper corner, and it breaks it down more in detail with base costs, walls, heating, sprinklers, etc. In addition to that, on the bottom, we're adding paving, loading wells, fencing, canopies, etc. So that's pretty much how the cost approach works for us. Sales comparison approach. Primarily, a bona fide sale of a property is the best evidence of value. However, in the absence of a sale of a property, you can compare it with the selling prices of similar properties. You have to make adjustments for differences. If, for instance, you're appraising apartments and your sales are older and you're appraising new apartments, you've got to make an adjustment for that. Also, you have to determine what units of comparison you're pulling out of that sale price. If you're determining land value, whether you're using a per acre or per square foot, or if you're trying to determine building values on per square foot of rentable space for office buildings or shopping centers, etc. This is the sales analysis we did on Laskin Road. We've got information about the building size, the age, the zoning, what the land size is. We've got different site ratings. We have to deviate for small size, large size, ones that have backland. So we've got a model set up where we use site ratings for various adjustments. Over on the far right side, we're showing the assessment to sale price ratio of the property. And I don't know if you can see it, but the second and third sale, one is at 120%, one is at 101%. That was the same property that sold twice. It sold in 2015 and sold again in 2016. So we're keying more on where we're at 101% of the sale price. The bottom two properties, our assessment to sale price ratios vary quite greatly. We're at 69% on one and 116% on the other. And this is in the same area. We're going to appraise both these properties similarly. So we picked a value that kind of fell in between those two. And that's what we see often when we're doing appraisals. Things don't always sell methodically. So we're trying to get our best fit that matches those sale prices. An income approach. This is something we use on our apartments, office buildings, shopping centers, hotels, motels, mini storage, campgrounds, trailer parks. The formula here is IRV, income over rate or value. If you know the income of the property, you can multiply, you can, if you're trying to determine the income of the property, it's the capitalization rate times value or sale price. If you're looking for the capitalization rate, you take the income of the property and divide it by value or sale price to try to get what the capitalization rate is. Value is income divided by the capitalization rate. Our sources of capitalization rates are our sales of property, and we would use the formula to compare sale price and income to get cap rates. Or we use national publications, and we use PricewaterhouseCoopers investor surveys that come out quarterly. And this is an example of an income approach on a shopping center. We keep running totals year by year by year, so if we don't get income submitted to us on this property, we can see what their track record has been over the years. Up at the top is the income that's submitted to us, and this property had submitted each year. Down on the bottom is the approach we use, and we pretty much use the values that were given to us, both income and expenses. We also have to allow for reserves for replacement to replace short-term items. That's in addition to their expenses. And in this particular property, we did an income approach and came up with $15,675,000, but there is a land and building lease for a restaurant on this property. So we pull the income from that and do it separately, because many times after we send the assessment notices out, we have to send letters to the taxpayer breaking down what were the Wendy's or the auto parts or whatever their out parcels were. So we do that separately. And then below that, on this particular shopping center, they also had a land lease for fast food. So when we capitalized the income, that only covered the land portion of that land lease. So we're adding at the bottom the value of the cost of the fast food building to the income approach. So that kind of took us from $15 million to $18 million with the two out parcels. A major part of what we do is based on statistics. We do mass appraisal. An assessment to sale price ratio is our determination of level of assessment. You take the assessment and divide it by the sale price, and then we average those. This past year we had 116 commercial sales. Our median assessment to sale price ratio was 93.19, and our mean was 93.24. So we were at about 93% of the sales, the 116 sales that occurred last year. Coefficient of dispersion kind of measures how close all those ratios are to the median ratio. For commercial property, a good coefficient of dispersion is 20, being below 20, and we were at 18.5. Price-related differential is a statistic that kind of compares how you do on your high-priced properties versus your low-priced properties. A good statistic here is 98 to 103, and we came in at 104. We were very close. So that's pretty much a quick synopsis of what we do.
Thank you, Sherry. Questions or comments? John?
I just want to let you know that I did ask, because I thought this was very good. I like statistics, and I like numbers, and I understand this very well. But the case that I know you got my email, the one I asked about, clearly fell outside, the one we discussed earlier, outside these parameter values by a huge amount. So I've asked Mr. Bannigan to show me how this methodology tracks to that specific example where there was a 66% variance between the appraised value and the assessment value. Certainly falls outside these parameters we see here, and I've asked him to share that with all of us separately, not for today, but I've asked him, because I'd like to see how this works and why that was such an outlier. Probably a good explanation, but I'd like to understand why it was an outlier.
Any other questions or comments?
And I might comment that Jerry did get an email back out to you all, and it went to all of the council, and we're going to re-engage in executive session, and I've asked Jerry to come back in, so if we want to get into it. So we're trying to tie some bows on some things today, and it just works out that Jerry's going to hang out with us.
Super.
Jerry, it's always great to have you hang out with us.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate it.
See you now. All right, we'll now go to the Tourism Investment Program. Patty and Brad.
I'm gonna do the intro if you don't mind.
You know, Go right
Mayor,
ahead.
Mr. Mayor, members of
Love
council.
32.
On the heels of us completing our FY18 budget, we talk a lot about, where our tax incomes go and where our dedications are. One of the things I really did not come through loud and clear is to give you all a very in-depth, informative briefing with regards to what is the tourism investment program fund. So today I've asked a combination of our finance director, Ms. Patty Phillips, and our CVB director, Mr. Brad Van Domelen, to kind of walk us through the step-by-step history, the components, and how we go about and what we use it for members of council who have not been a part of that discussion. So, thank you very much, Mayor.
Patty, glad to have you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As Dave said, I'm here to just kind of walk you through a little bit about the Tourism Investment Program Fund. We call it the TIP Fund. And just a little history, and I was around then, so I know this history. The council established what we call the TGIF Fund, the Tourism Growth Investment Fund, and where we set aside certain revenues to support projects, maintain the image of the resort city. And at that point, I think there was a couple projects that were funded out of that, the hurricane protection project being the biggest one. In 2001, the whole issue of replacing the convention center arose. And we established what we call the Major Projects Fund, where we would fund the new convention center, the Sandler Center, and a parking lot expansion for the aquarium. And we actually raised the hotel community, agreed to a hotel tax increase, a significant one, and those monies were placed in that fund. Well, over time, we realized having two separate funds didn't make sense, so in 2011, it was renamed. A merger of those funds called the TIP, Tourism Investment Program, were accounted for the same things but just put them in one spot. And so basically, the TIP fund receives a portion of tourism-related revenues and supports tourism projects, special events, and ongoing resort maintenance. And there are other tourism-related revenues that support the TAP fund, the Tourism Advertising Program, TAP, open space, EDIP, and of course the general fund as well, and we'll walk through some of that. And this is, finance director shows things a certain way, and I apologize, but it seemed like the easiest way to get started. In the light blue, I've showed the revenues that go into the TIP fund. We know 5% plus the dollar room night of the hotel tax, 1.06% of the restaurant meal tax, all of the amusement tax, whether that's 10% or 5%, 5 cents of the cigarette tax, and then of course we've got resort area franchise and permits, parking tickets, event program, holiday lights, and so forth. I laid out the TAP fund just to illustrate 1% of the hotel tax plus a dollar room night goes there, and a 0.5 cent of the restaurant meal tax. Open space, 0.44 cent of the restaurant meal tax. The general fund portions of those tax, 2% of the hotel, 3.5 of the restaurant meal tax. Of course, the major portion of the cigarette tax, and of course EDIP gets 16%, 16 cents of the hotel. This is the annual budget of each of those funds, 39.5 for the TIP fund, 12.1 for TAP, open space, 5.5 from these sources, general fund 63. This is just the tourism things that we've identified. The general fund is $1 billion certainly, and more, and EDIP $2.5 million. So just kind of wanted to put in one spot all those pieces. This is another look at it, and this is just the hotel tax and the meal tax. And I put again light blue, TIP fund, how the hotel tax is broken out, and we've got the portions that go to TIP, the 5%, the $1, and then the meal tax, the 1.06. I'm not going to repeat, but just shows that hotel tax citywide is almost $35 million for FY18. And then over 68, almost 69 million on the meal tax piece that's divided up partially into the TIP fund, as well as other funds. Now, just this is the tip fund budget, all the pieces. The revenue side, again, we're repeating the hotel tax, 5.5, plus the $1, the meal tax, 1.06, amusement tax, cigarettes, parking, beach rentals, and other revenues, 39.5 million. Lion's share supports debt service, 22.4 million. I'll talk more about that. Beach operations, resort maintenance, HRT transit, support tourism, beach events, entertainment, beach street, other special events. And you'll notice we've got a $7.9 million reserve for other things to build up the fund balance. Outstanding debt being paid out of the tip fund is $33.2 million. And you can see it's going to be reduced pretty quickly over the next few years. We have what we call level principal. So each year the amount of debt service being paid goes down because the amount of principal is going down quicker.
What was the term, 20 years?
20. We have not estimated, I know there's been discussion of additional debt for the Fieldhouse and for parking, arena parking, and Fieldhouse parking, so those are not in there. What are some of the projects that have been financed out of the TIP fund? And this is the list, and I'm not going to go over all of them, but we've mentioned the convention center. We've also mentioned the boardwalk, revitalization, and then the hurricane protection boardwalk. One of the first ones, the early ones, is the Atlantic Avenue improvements. You might remember what Atlantic Avenue looked like 25, 30 years ago and what it looks like today, so quite a difference. Some projects still to be completed, 19th Street infrastructure, arena infrastructure off-site and on-site, and then Pacific Avenue, that's sort of in progress now. And again, we have not included anywhere at this point the convention center, Fieldhouse, or the garage. That's been under discussion. And just again, convention center, we opened it in 2005. Originally, it was funded out of the major projects and then merged into the TIP fund. Debt service alone in FY18 is $14.6 million. You know, most of the debt service being paid out of TIP is for this, and that will be paid off in 2028. Sandler Center opened 2007. It's 10th year anniversary coming up. Debt service is about $2.5 million right now, and that should be paid off in 2028. Rudy Walk through the TIP, $1.5 million. And that will be retired in 2021, just a few more years. Beach erosion and hurricane, that was a $130 million project or more, and the city's portion was 44.8. It's long been completed, and that will be retired in 2020. Pacific Avenue, we've only issued part of the debt. We do most of the debt reimbursement basis, so we're only paying $635 right now. That should be paid off in another 20 years or so. Atlantic Avenue, that's all been paid for, $42.5 million. And this little chart here, if I can walk you through, we have projected out all the revenues, and we've taken into account potential sunsets and so forth. We've got here the debt service on the arena infrastructure programmed in here. We've got the payments of the 1% hotel tax going to USM in here. And we look at our fund balance. We like to maintain about a 10% or more fund balance. You can see this is going to exceed that. So this fund balance is going to grow quite markedly over the next few years. It does not include anything about a field house or a parking garage at this juncture. And I'm going to turn it over now to Brad, who will walk you through.
Thank you, Patty. Brad, we're glad to have you, sir.
Good job.
Nika?
Nope, well, maybe. Thank you. Thank you, Patty. Good afternoon, everybody. Patty did a great job of highlighting a lot of the numbers associated with the TIP fund. What I really want to emphasize is the TIP fund's true origin, and that origin, which is tourism, because without tourism, the TIP fund doesn't have any capacity. And without tourism, we would have to fund these projects through the general fund, or likely many of these projects would not have been funded at all. So when tourism is strong, tourism generates capacity for projects like the ones that Patty just went through without having to use the general fund. In fact, tourism, in addition to creating capacity with the TIP fund, actually contributes to other funds such as the general fund and other funds like the open space program as well, thus subsidizing the tax base for residents without the residents having to contribute those funds. So when we look at tourism, talk about tourism, how is the health of our tourism industry doing, which is important to us. In 2015, we welcomed over 6.5 or nearly 6.5 million overnight visitors to Virginia Beach. Those visitors generated $1.4 billion in direct spending in Virginia Beach, and that's kind of demonstrating the export nature of the tourism industry, because as an export industry, it really is bringing new dollars into our economy. Then it generated $122 million in state and local taxes and supports nearly 13,000 jobs here in Virginia Beach. And we look at our performance, looking at 2016 as the most recent completed year. So when we look at how Virginia Beach is performing against our what we consider our primary comp set of other destinations like Myrtle Beach, Ocean City, Coastal Carolina region, and even Williamsburg. Our year-end numbers, if you look at the left side of the chart, our occupancy was stronger than our comp set at 62.5% on an annualized basis, which is a little below the average annual occupancy across the U.S., which is 65.5%, but certainly on the stronger end of our comp set. And if you look at the ADR, which is average daily rate, and RevPAR, which is a really key metric for the hotel industry, which is revenue per available room, we're slightly behind Ocean City, but we're ahead in both those areas from the U.S. average, which is around $124 in average rate and a little under $80 in RevPAR. If you look at the right side of the chart there, which is the year-over-year change of 2016 compared to 2015, we led our comp set in occupancy and RevPAR, and ADR slightly behind Myrtle Beach. This is where I want to spend a little time, a little infographic here that kind of demonstrates the life cycle of the visitor taxes. And as Patty just went through a lot of this information, this is a different way of presenting it. And if you look at, again, the visitor coming into our market, staying overnight, they pay 8% on the local hotel tax, they pay 6% on the state sales tax. So that's the total of 14% in those taxes they pay. And if you break the 8% local tax down, as Patty demonstrated earlier, into the TAP fund, the 1%, the TIP fund, 5%, and general fund, 2%. And that kind of takes that 8% and how that is distributed. If you look at the TAP fund, which is our tourism advertising and promotion fund, that is us reinvesting that 1% into marketing the destination, promoting it, which helps us generate that $1.4 billion in visitor spending. We take that money and we reinvest it into our marketing programs, which provides us an ROI over $67 in spending for every dollar we spend in marketing and promotion. $3.44 comes back to the city in forms of local taxes for every dollar we spend, and $3.39 to the state for every dollar we spend. So that money kind of gets recirculated, reinvested into marketing our destination. It then helps drive more of this future spending for our destination. The TIP fund, which we're really kind of the focus of our conversation today, is an important part of this program. 5% of this 8% goes to the TIP fund, which helps us develop this infrastructure for tourism infrastructure, which helps us be a more complete and a more competitive destination for our tourism as well as for our resorts. And of course, being a competitive destination is an important city council priority as well. And that's the tourism portion of it, where those dollars go. But it also, as we said a moment ago, it also funds programs other than tourism programs. So 2% of the 8% goes to the general fund, which helps with vital city services, which helps, again, subsidize the local tax base. So locals don't have to pay as much, in taxes that are subsidized by this 2%. And then we look at the state portion of it, the 6%. 2% of that comes back to the city, again, in form of funding back to our school systems and also for our general fund, which helps make Virginia Beach a more desirable community to live in. And now the same similar type of a infographic for the other portion of it. Visitors, when they come here, they don't just sleep, they eat as well. And they go out to our local restaurants and they pay their local restaurant tax at 5.5%. So you have the same TAP fund, tip fund, and general fund contributions, but we add another one here to the open space program that just short of 0.5% goes to the open space program that makes, again, Virginia Beach a more desirable community and quality of life community for visitors to live in. So again, some of this TAP fund, the 0.5% that goes to the advertising promotion, goes back and is reinvested to kind of keep this regenerating itself. The tip fund, again, helps support those infrastructure programs. And then the general fund, again, subsidizing city services from tourism activities. So, in summary, in 1993, City Council had the strategic vision to create a vital funding mechanism, and that funding mechanism is still working very well today, 24 years later. TIP fund projects help create a more competitive resort destination for tourism, also enhancing the quality of life for local residents. Without tourism, I think this is the key point, that without tourism, the funds for these programs would not exist. These is not as if these funds are being taken from another source. These are self-generating or regenerating funds from tourism activity to support these tourism projects. And the TIP fund has sufficient capacity to finance a Fieldhouse facility and a necessary parking garage. And looking at where we go from here, kind of next steps for the resort area, we anticipate hopefully the closing of the arena sometime soon and construction to begin shortly after that. Weekly construction briefings have already been going on for a number of weeks, so everybody is getting ready for this activity to take place. The Fieldhouse and parking garage briefings will take place over the next few weeks. The dome site program for the redevelopment of the dome site is moving forward. The initial interviews have taken place with the 4 different development groups. Those have been completed. And then contracts for the 19th Street and Vibe District streetscapes will be awarded here shortly, and construction, we'll be looking forward to that starting this coming winter. And with that, I'll just open it up for any questions or discussion.
Brad?
Just two, or just a question.
John?
On slide 16, I'm just trying, slide 16.
I'm not sure which one 16 is. Oh, here we go.
Is the 122 a subset of the 1.4, or
No.
is it on top of the 1.4?
The 1.4 is just direct spending.
Gotcha. Just
And then
make
the
sure.
122 is taxes generated from the spending.
On slide 18, if you went and said for every direct dollar that's spent, would it be correct to conclude from that slide that you would apply 14% against that 1.4 million, or is that, because you're saying there's the overnight direct dollar spent, there's 8% local tax on average, I'm sure that's blended between, say, all the things, and 6% state. Would you then say the right answer is you would take that 14% and multiply it against the 1.4 billion to get the revenue collected? I'm just trying to understand the relationship of that breakdown chart to slide 16.
Well, the 1.4 billion in spending is more than just hotel spending.
So this is just hotel spending on this slide?
This is only hotel. This is only
Okay.
for overnight from hotel. So when you check in a hotel, you pay the 8% and the 6% on your hotel rate.
If you go to the next one then?
The
I
next,
missed- sorry.
this one?
So this is, so obviously here, there's more being spent than on restaurants, because there's amusement tax. So there's no relationship between these slides and the $122 million.
No, not directly. I mean, there's additional.
Super. I just
that
want to make
adds
sure I
up
had
to
that straight. I just
Yeah.
confirmed that. Thank you very much. I thought that was a very nice presentation.
You're
Thank
very welcome. Thank you. Any other questions?
Questions or comments? Does anyone dispute these numbers? Because in my opinion, this is something that needs to be broadcast.
I think the only thing we don't know is on the meal tax, how much of the meal tax income, total that comes in, comes from residents?
Or
and what
tourists.
comes-
I
think we don't
get,
know that.
and we gotta sit back and say, is that a fair break or not? You know,
Absolutely.
I remember when we were doing it. And-
Councilman,
Go
I'm sorry.
ahead.
I was going to say, in answer to your question, we did have discussion with Paul Harrison last week. He has done analysis over the period of time to look at the percentage or the amount of restaurant tax is coming from residents versus non-residents. He just updated a study in the last week, and 31.4% is the average of restaurant revenues, restaurant taxes that are being generated from non-residents.
That'd be great if you could share the methodology by how he did, that'd be great.
And I agree, I want to see that too, because I'm not, I
I'm
want
with
us
you.
all
That's
be
just
on the
the one-
same sheet of music.
I'm with you, sir.
And then when we go with the public-privates, I want to make sure we agree on these dollar figures.
Right.
I mean, I think it's absolutely critical that we have the facts for everyone.
True, and then you have to also talk about displacement when you talk about that issue.
And in total agreement. I mean, there's a philosophy difference, but the dollars should
Oh, I'm
be
with
what
you.
they
I thought
are.
a good presentation. You asked me, I'm just telling you the
But,
meals is the one thing in question.
Another question, real estate taxes. They go where? At the oceanfront.
General fund.
What?
General fund.
General fund. I think those numbers also should be included somewhere, because I think that's a pretty significant dollar amount too. We got a lot of valuable real estate down there, and that goes directly to the general fund. Something that I forget, and shame on me, that state, which was just shown here, the state sales tax, 2%, does come back to the general fund.
I just wanted to point out regarding the meal tax, that back in around 1986, we did a detailed study of this, it was sort of like the seminal issue, looking at this. And there were studies done by a consultant for the city before I was involved, but it showed 30% as well. So it was sort of interesting that the latest
Nice
analysis
to have
shows.
all that to back up the information. I mean, really. John, you need to do something with this.
Well, I mean, the one thing that wasn't mentioned on here, and of course, you got to extrapolate that number too, is also the retail sales. So, we get 2% of that also comes back, 1% going to the schools, and then 1% going to our general fund. So,
Is there a way to get a handle on that?
you're going to have to do it through a study and try and figure out what it is with the spending. But I will say, ironically enough, it's not what I want to do when I'm on vacation, but the number one thing that people do when they're on vacation is shop. And that's what they do at Virginia Beach. And when you take a look at our overnight visitor surveys, that's what they're doing. So, it's more than what we just have
We
here.
used to collect that information. You may remember when the Commissioner of Revenue collected, and Patty probably remembers too, when he collected that, I don't know if he used census tract data, but he would give aggregate data that came from the oceanfront versus hotel, other places. That report used to be done, but then he claimed he no longer had the manpower to do that report. But that was produced historically. That data is available if you go back to census tract data.
Dave, I'd like to see if we could get that. John?
I do know
Mr.
it
Kellum
exists.
is working on reestablishing an ability to track that. He's been a year at it. He promises me it's coming.
The new financial system.
We got to be careful with that too, because it's always number one or number two, but one of the top destinations for tourists while they're here is Lynn Haven Mall. So you can't even break, it goes everywhere.
Well, and I hate to keep on
In town
going,
center.
but I've got to sit back and say, I remember in the late 80s, and you were right here, a lot of us were right here, and we were saying, gosh, people kept saying to us, you got to be like this one, this one, this one on that list. And now we're exceeding those. And I think that's another example of the investments that have been made that are paying off, because those numbers speak for themselves as far as competition goes. So,
But it still begs the question, why our per capita sales tax collections are less and substantially less than Chesapeake. I know we've talked about that here before, but I'm telling you, that is hundreds and hundreds, still a $500 differential. And that still begs, why is that?
North Carolina.
I know we tried to explain it, we just
Carolina.
never got it. And we think it's North Carolina, but goodness gracious, let's build a better road in North Carolina. But
Anyway.
it is an amazing data set. I just have a hard time, I've worked on that a number of times, I just can't figure that out. But it's a lot of money.
All out there at Greenbrier.
okay, great information, great
Chesapeake,
report.
you should know.
Thank you very much.
I'll work on that answer.
Okay,
It's phenomenal.
we're now going to the City Hall proposal from Town Center. And I'll introduce Dave Hanson, City Manager. Dave, you're up,
All
buddy.
right, thank you, Mayor, members of council. Before I get started, I'd like to introduce the Armada Hoffler Chief Investment Officer, Eric Smith. Eric's here today representing the proposal from Armada Hoffler and is on hand to provide any information that you may request. My job today is to
We're
provide
glad to have you here, Eric.
My job today is to provide you a public briefing on what the Armada Hoffler proposal is. And so I am going to utilize a large majority of the written proposal that we received about 2 weeks ago. And it's somewhat modified and shrank. It's only down to about 34 charts as opposed to the 68 that we started with. So with that as a lead-in, their executives, from an executive summary perspective, Armada Hoffler's submission was an attempt to make us aware that as we as a city become a larger, more sophisticated city beyond what we ever were in the early 80s and 90s when we first decided to create a town center, the opportunity to consider relocating City Hall into the heart of your commercial, your commerce, and your population of your city is a action that would mirror what is going on in most nationally recognized metropolitan centers. And our looks at where our population is and where our businesses are represents that the location of our city hall is exactly there. They provide some information, some data to us in their proposal based on the 2015 Census Bureau data. Identifying Virginia Beach as our 41st most populous city in the United States. When I came here in 2006, we were the 39th largest city in the United States. We are slipping. We're not growing as fast as other municipalities, and that is a concern to me as your manager. And they relate to us that when you take a look at the other 40 largest cities in the United States, the average distance of their city hall with respect to their organized central business district is significantly greater than the mean and the mode of that. And so they provide to us, as you had in their proposal, those 40 and us as the 41st largest cities, and they reflect in 2015 rank the distance from their city hall to their central business district. And on page 2, you get an opportunity to see where Virginia Beach, as the 41st largest city in the United States, falls out. And the mean is about 6.2 miles from the other 40 largest city halls to their central business district. And in Virginia Beach, we are 9.2 miles. Continuing on with the executive summary, and in the letter that you received with my cover letter in your briefing on Friday, the day prior, we received a recharacterization request by Armada Hoffler that their proposal be considered a PPEH submittal. And in doing so, their letter also stated that upon having an opportunity to look at the Mosley presentation that was delivered last time we met 2 Tuesdays ago, they are in agreement with the Class A office space cost estimates that Mosley put together, and have agreed that they can deliver a not to exceed commitment to the average cost of those 4 options, which is about $56 million. There is a huge consideration that has to be given towards the parking garage requirements to locate a city hall in our town center. And those discussions will happen in a standalone briefing to follow this. But they also address it in in their proposal. And what they want to emphasize in the third bullet here is that 20 years ago, the City Council recognized the importance of creating a town center. And you reached out for a partner that would build that town center, that would convert what was a pine forest adjacent to One Columbus and across the street from Pembroke Mall into your town center. You are now up 20 years later, and so an opportunity to make another major step in growing your town center is before you. And what Armada Hoffler wants to do is for you to be aware that they are prepared to assist us in supporting a decision that would relocate the City Hall to Town Center if that is the political desire or the desire of this political body to do so. It is clearly one of the most significant decisions that you as a City Council have to make during this year. And that is, now that we have explained to you the critical need to prepare, to finance and to design and construct a new City Hall is before us, as this building is on the end of its life. And so we have an opportunity to make a major consideration. Armada Hoffler's proposal is to, and not that they took exception to the Mosley presentation, but you'll recall, as Tom Nicholas presented, we selected the site 4A as the one place that we had purchased, the Circuit City site. And that is what we pursued to provide an opportunity to consider Town Center. And so once the budget was approved and we received their proposal, they are recommending that the new City Hall move to Block 15, which is the current location of the Regal Cinema. And they will also be wanting to, if this occurs, make a very sizable investment in the remaining areas adjacent to that in their Block 16 of that portion of Town Center. One of the things that they are considering, of course, or several of the things that they are considering is an office tower with a newly constructed theater, a sizable hotel with structured parking associated with it, residential multifamily living apartments or adjacent to what would be City Hall. And I'll show you some block diagrams associated with that. Additionally, they are proposing the creation of green space. And as we look at designing a town center, it is critically important that we preserve green space like Central Park in New York City. We need to preserve some green space in our town center because all the green space that we currently have really exists in the green space around the BMP at the lake. And now that we have built in Block 9, Phase 6, and have taken away the green space that was in there. And so moving forward, preserving that is critically important. So what they are recommending is to exchange on a square footage or acreage basis the placement of City Hall into Block 15 in exchange for property that we currently own, that you currently own at the Circuit City site. One of the things that they are talking about is when they relocate Bed Bath and Beyond or maybe another significant highest and best use economic investment into the priority site, they would take the priority building as we know it today and do an extensive expansion and renovation of that so that they can maximize the retail delivery of that space fronting Independence Avenue. And then they conclude on this, this one chart here that they have over 35 years of municipal construction experience and have most recently completed several city halls, of which one was the city of Suffolk. And you recall in your package on Friday a letter from the city of Suffolk about how well and how responsive, timely, and in budget they were. This map reflects Independence Avenue here and Virginia Beach Boulevard here. The interstate's running below the screen. The Mosley presentation cited in 4A, the location of City Hall here. And what Armada Hoffler is proposing is to locate City Hall on block 15 here. Block 16 is here, and block 17 is to the north of Virginia Beach Boulevard. And so, as you recall from looking at their proposal, they created a building block diagram. It's certainly not a design. It is the fundamental conceptual basis by which you take a parcel and you start to say, what could we possibly build on that? And those images are not intended to depict actual architectural drawings or finalized version of the proposal. And their commitment that their proposal is conceptual in nature and is in accordance with the initial submission requirements of the PPA process. Currently, I will tell you that Mark Stiles' office is reviewing their submittal in compliance with the requirements of the PPA. We recognize there are still some additional things that they have to do to recharacterize their proposal to be in compliance with the PPA. But what it provides is an opportunity for the City Council to look at allowing the concepts to go forward and allowing other developer builders from across the city or anywhere to submit a proposal so that you, the council, get to look at what are all the possibilities as you go about looking at what decision you might make going forward. So let's take a look at what Armada Hoffler is proposing. Once again, here's Virginia Beach Boulevard. Over here where my pointer is Independence. And you come in, you hit Constitution Drive, and remember Constitution Drive, the bridge that we created across Thalia Creek and has that connection, and we now have an integrated transportation system incorporated into our town center, and now we're prepared to move into this block of development. And so where the Regal Theater is where we're proposing, or where Armada Hoffler is proposing to place City Hall in town center, as opposed to over here where the Circuit City site would be. Adjacent to that would be apartments or residential. Adjacent to that in this pink block would be a hotel on top of structured parking. And in between the City Hall, the hotel, and to the west would be a reconstruction of the Regal Theater and office space on top of structured parking and retail on the ground floor. And then you can see where the green space is there in the center. Kind of a high up view looking at the same thing. And then the design here is this becomes office space for City Hall, and on the ground floor a service center, a full service center that would be consisting of the treasurer, the commissioner, a DSC for plan submission, permitting, full-size permitting. They would take the larger office from here to there, and they keep a field office down here in that service center. There would be a major public utilities, city services service center there for the 4 bills that everybody pays on their soon-to-be monthly billing that we will be going to. You, the council, and your chambers and your informal space would be significantly enlarged than the space that we're sitting in today. And that would all be in a standalone facility, not a standalone, an attached, so that the public could get to it from either of these two parking garages simply by walking into the green space and coming on board to where the meeting space would be. Just looking down Columbus Street, which is, as you know, I'm on Independence and I'm driving down Columbus, and I'm entering the new block of construction that we have here. This would be Constitution. If I took a right, I'd cross the tracks, I'd go over the bridge, and I'd be at Bonnie. If I took a left, I'd be going where Barnes & Noble's was, and Bed Bath & Beyond, and I'd be getting to Virginia Beach Boulevard. And then one more aerial to get. So I mentioned that we received a letter from them. It was dated 1 June, recharacterizing their proposal and also committing to a not to exceed a cost of the average of the other Mosley options. Key to their proposal is the land swap, as I mentioned, and that is swapping the square footage for square footage requirements of to create about 2.2 acres of land for the city hall, and using an assessed value effective with our FY18 assessment. And that swap, I'm going to make a recommendation at the end that we move forward rather than use assessed value, but we use an appraisal value, simply because we know what we paid for Circuit City. We know that it's government property. We know we really haven't marketed that at this point. At the same time, Armada Hoffler moved forward with a recent purchase and, of course, has fair market value of what they paid for their property, and it will actually turn out to be the comp associated with an appraisal for them. Their proposal is that Armada Hoffler will use a Design Build Institute of America document standard form agreement such that the builder's risk is a cost plus fee, meaning that the PPA accepted price through a negotiated comprehensive agreement is a guaranteed maximum price contract. And the fee that they have listed here at 5%, you should be aware of all the other phases of Town Center were constructed on a 6% fee. And so when they asked us about this, we said, look, in order for us to even give this great consideration, let's try and get this thing down lower. And so they dropped it 1% from what we have done in all our other phases of Town Center. So let's take a look at what the land exchange is. And there's multiple ways that you can demonstrate this, but in this column, this is the Circuit City priority infinity, acreage, square footage, and then the purchase price and current assessed value. Columbus Village 2, they acquired 10.535 acres, and this was their purchase price at $26.7 million. We estimate that we need about 2.2 acres to provide that blue box that you saw on the diagrams that will provide what we need for City Hall and to provide the landscaping and maybe the plaza area associated with a City Hall as it leads to green space. And they also provide in their proposal the size of the green space being about 1.18 acre, and the price of that is determined by the cost per acre associated with their purchase of Columbus Village 2. And so if you look here at how much currently assessed the City Hall acreage is, and you take a look at what the, when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about the cost of the 2.2 acres as it's placed against the 26.7, the cost of the green space, the 1.18 acres, as placed against the 26. You can see that it has a cost of in excess of about 8.4 million, 5 million. And if you take out the assessed value that we currently have in our lot, there's an excess value to the city of about 2.3 million. They do not include, but they do annotate that if we were to have to acquire the construction of roads, just like Lynn Haven Parkway or just like Laskin Gateway or anything else, we would have to purchase X amount of square feet for the roads at a cost associated with their purchase price, which would be that. And that is not taken into consideration as part of their proposal. So we now turn our attention to what is the parking garage analysis and some of the considerations that that we as a city that you as a city council and we as a city have taken and has guided us as we go about the other phases of town center. These first three bullets all articulate the process that you have utilized to create parking in your town center. It is to maximize the space available by placing parking strategically on top of the office or within the residential structures, that you time load parking needs. One of the things that you saw in the Mosley proposal 4A was a standalone 470 space parking garage on the Circuit City. Unfortunately, it would not serve town center, and it would be a standalone garage for government workers and public tenants. But at night, it would serve no purpose unless you had just some outrageously large event in town center and the overflow parking might find its way to that location. And I'll provide you a chart that they gave us to take a look at that. One of the most important things, critically important, is to maximize the use of structured parking as a foundation for the retail and for the entertainment and the office space and the residential that you build in a town center. The exception to that would be we cannot put structured parking underneath a city government building. I think from a security standpoint, most of you all would agree and understand that risk is not one that we would undertake. We would want government employees and citizens that were coming to City Hall to attend a meeting or to pay a bill or to submit a permit application. They would park in an adjacent parking garage and they would be able to access directly adjacent to that City Hall. I think most significant in their proposal, beyond the fact that we understand that the construction of 140 to 150,000 square foot City Hall in town center is equivalent to the same cost of building that City Hall here in the municipal center or the cost of building it anywhere else in the city for that matter, is significantly enhancing the opportunity for Armada Hoffler to continue their private investment in town center. And so what they are consciously looking at is, should we make a major commitment there, they would look very favorably in making their next major investment here in Virginia Beach as opposed to potential other locations. And then the last bullet on here talks about the size of the parking garage. And so just quickly, let me give you an analysis that Armada Hoffler has done, but has used the model that the consultant for our development authority consistently uses to do their parking modeling and estimates in our town center. And if we decide to move forward, we would have that model that Armada Hoffler has estimated here, validated by the development authority's modeler consultant model. And so they took a look at what do we need midday and on weekdays, 1166, and nighttime about 1161. And so they're recommending that with 2 parking garages that you saw at the hotel and below the office and the theater entertainment area, plus parking on street, you'd have about 1,283 spaces created by moving forward this decision. Not going to take you through all this, but I think what's significant here is Armada Hoffler would have to make a decision to move Bed Bath & Beyond and start moving forward with their plan, their design plan to relocate them, and that design would, of course, greatly expand the Infinity / Circuit City building and do a major renovation on a very old structure there, and they'd have to get going on that design somewhere in that November timeframe. That has a cascading effect in that diagram to get you to where they would need to commence and start working on City Hall design. The construction schedule, as you can see, from the time that you might start on City Hall is, of course, about 2 years to get that completed from the time that you make a decision and would concur with a comprehensive agreement to do that. I think most importantly in the letter that they sent to me is a conscientious decision to give you, the political body, an opportunity to consider this. Not so much that it's essential that they have you locate City Hall in Town Center, but that they are willing to be partners in another phase and expansion of what your city, what your town center can deliver to you for the next 10 to 20 years. And of course, here's the letter I've referred to several times that I received on Thursday from their CEO, Lou Haddad. This is their team, which is really pretty consistent with what we've seen from them. Armada Hoffler, Clark Nixon, and that is the partnership of design build that they would be proposing. In your package, you had an opportunity to look at the Suffolk Municipal Center, the Dinwiddie Municipal Center. You're aware that they participated not as a prime, but as a sub, Clark Nixon did with the Courts Building in Norfolk. And of course, Clark Nixon is partnered up with USM for the arena. And had there's a list in the proposal of multiple design build experience, 3 pages worth to be exact, which I'm clicking through exponentially. And so let me get to a conclusion before I provide you some recommendations on your charts. Certainly relocating City Hall to Town Center would provide a new modern building so that we have an opportunity to continue the economic expansion of our city. I've been on your staff now for 11 plus years, and I can tell you, having been a deputy city manager for infrastructure, finance, and technology in the city, and now the city manager in my second year, we don't use the municipal center as a forum for economic development and incentivizing out-of-town CEOs or vice presidents of relocation to entice them to move to Virginia Beach. We take them to Town Center. We take them to our convention center. We take them to our resort. We do not bring them down here to have that economic development incentive conversation. And so as we compete against the other 40 largest cities in America for business, for workforce, meaning millennials, and the generation to follow, as we move forward to grow our economy, because as Ms. McConnell presented last fall at a seminar that I attended, you really have 3 choices. You can raise taxes, you can reduce services, or you can grow your economy. And that has stuck with me throughout my year and a half as your city manager, and I believe that we have to grow our economy in order to keep our taxes affordable and to provide the quality of life that we have grown accustomed to. I believe that locating the city hall there, as does Armando Hoffler, will bring it more closely aligned with the center of our population and certainly the center of our commerce. We will have to constrain our desire for opulence and open space, glass and steel, but at a certain point, you still have to commit to an attractive, well-meaning, enticing, modern opportunity to compete for private dollars to relocate to our city. We will come back to you to talk about the parking garage and where we are financially with the TIF in Town Center. It's another information briefing that we need to walk through over the months ahead. And as Armando Hoffler, throughout their proposal, has stated that City Hall moving to Town Center would be a catalyst for the next 20-year development of your Town Center. And so I would like to give way, before I give you a recommendation, to Mr. Smith, their CIO, to make just a brief comment on behalf of his CEO.
We welcome you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Dave. And I'll be brief in my comments. I know your time together is precious on these days. Before I start, let me also send the regrets of Lou Haddad, our CEO. He and our CFO are currently in New York at the North American REIT conference, where they meet with some 40 some odd institutional investors over a 3-day period, and that happens twice a year. So it's a really important opportunity for us to showcase our company and in large part one of our core assets, Town Center, et cetera, in that forum. So he regrets not being here. But in his stead, and on behalf of the entire senior leadership team at Armando Hoffler, I want to express how proud we are of what we've accomplished together in Town Center. We showcase Town Center very frequently, whether it's to the institutional investors, many of which I just mentioned that Lou's meeting with in New York, and these are institutional investors from places as far as New York and Chicago and San Francisco and Dallas and Atlanta and Baltimore, all over the country, where they come in to meet us and learn about the company, and we tell them all about our history in Virginia Beach, and they get to touch the brick and mortars of Town Center, and we showcase it with Wall Street folks who come down from the investment banks and such. So we take a great deal of pride in what we've accomplished together, and make no doubt, we are very eager to continue that relationship with the next phase of Town Center if this is the route that takes. We very much believe in, we've looked at the data that Dave has shared with you today. We very much believe in the value proposition of bringing City Hall and having the center of business and commerce co-located with the seat of government. We think that there's a number of synergies there, not only for the location to the central focal point of the population. Obviously, we've talked about the synergies of having those two together from an economic development standpoint, as Dave mentioned. We think there's huge advantages as people see the alignment of goals and incentives of the political body and the business community. And of course, this would be the first phase where actually folks are coming as part of the city, the folks who would work at City Hall. So, and thus the parking spaces they need, as Dave outlined, would be included in a garage. It could be carried by the TIF. So it's that same TIF structure that supports a public garage, which makes it all possible. And it really leverages that in that it also serves the very people that would be coming with City Hall. So that is a fantastic reason from our perspective to invest a significant amount of money in the order of magnitude of $100 million, if you've seen, in the next phase across office, retail, hospitality, et cetera. But let me be clear about how this evolved so we're all on the same page. We saw all the hard work that the council and staff had done in preparing the options, excluding the Columbus Village option. And we looked at that and saw the Circuit City site as an option. That was the impetus for us saying, well, if the idea is on the table to have a visionary move of City Hall to the to the central business district and town center more specifically. And in line with some of the visionary things we've heard talked about here today, the TGIF and other things, we obviously think that's a good idea. But we saw an opportunity, instead of the Circuit City site, to move it over to the Columbus Village site, if that's one of the options that's being considered, where it can then not just be a standalone decision, but be the catalyst for a large sum of additional investment from the private side in the order of magnitude of $100 million. So that was the impetus to the proposal. The decision is obviously and appropriately with the body that I speak to here today, and we respect that. We just want to be a source of information along that process in whatever way we can. And I guess my last comment is I'll put on my Chief Investment Officer hat for a moment and just give you a lens into how we think about things. Again, just so we're having a fully informed discussion and you appreciate the perspective from our side of the table. We're a New York Stock Exchange traded company, as you all know, I believe the only one in Virginia Beach, which means we have a great access to capital as such. That capital, however, is not unlimited. So one of my primary responsibilities as CIO is to allocate that financial capital across opportunities we have up and down the East Coast, as evidenced by the some $500 million of current pipeline projects we have at the moment up and down the East Coast, many outside of Virginia and Hampton Roads. And so that's always a relative discussion about where to invest that capital. And it certainly should be pointed out that City Hall moving to Town Center on the Columbus Village site would be a meaningful catalyst that we could easily support putting in the type of money we're talking about on the private side. And relative to other opportunities we're looking at and all the ones that are currently sitting on our desk, that is a very good use of the capital that we have. And not to say that the next phase of Town Center couldn't happen without the catalyst of City Hall, but you can imagine that without the support of the parking garage, which are very expensive structures, they're needed to support the office and retail and hospitality we're talking about, especially when they can also support the folks of City Hall. Without that, it just becomes incrementally more difficult to find the opportunity to invest that amount of capital and get the required reasonable return that we need on our side, on the private side. And so I just leave you with that little bit of window into our view of the world and how we need to approach it, which is it's always a relative decision against our other opportunities. All that being said, I want to leave you with, we very much think that moving City Hall to Town Center is the right thing for the ongoing collaboration of this body and the leadership on the city side and the business community, and we fully support it and want to be a resource in any way we can, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Eric. Okay. I appreciate your attention, but probably one of the more important briefings that we'll entertain as we enter into about a 90-day public engagement period. Here's our recommendations coming out of this brief. First, to move forward with garnering an appraisal of our city-owned Circuit City Infinity property. That way, any conversation going further about what the costs and the impacts of a land swap, we can get apples to apples with regards to that. Review and decide on accepting the concept plan in accordance with the PPA process, so as to open an opportunity for all developer builders to offer and that should be an two Fs, off-campus proposals for the new City Hall. By doing that, we open the door so it's not exclusionary for folks. And I can't tell you that the City Hall is the right place, but I think it is. But maybe there's something else out there. And if you accept the concept going forward in the weeks to come, it will open up a 60-day window for other concepts to be put together and submitted for consideration as other alternative courses of action for you to contemplate. We've got to work on the parking garage and the TIF analysis and to talk about what we've done in the past, what we might do going forward. And then finally, We are working on our public engagement strategy. We know that we have, we're scheduling 3 public meetings, June, July, and August. One here in the Municipal Center, one at the Convention Center, and one up in Town Center, so that public information can go down there. We're going to have conversations with Councilman Dyer and his process improvement team, so that they have input and have an opportunity to weigh in on how things might go forward. We are working on a social media connectivity strategy, utilizing more than just public hearing in order to get input from citizens, because this is the center of the people, the City Hall. We're going to brief the Development Authority because they currently own Circuit City site. We've got to work through all the legalities, and I'm calling on our city attorney to be a major player in helping us navigate through the process. Conduct a virtual town hall survey, and so we got to craft that, and we'll probably get that out to you so that you all can kind of chop on what we're thinking there. And then provide support to any of you all who wish to go forward with the town hall and have discussions inside your own districts about that. So, subject to your questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I do have Bobby Dyer.
Yeah, thank you. And with council's permission, I'm going to speak as the designated person to try to sell the concepts about what we're going to be trying to do to replace City Hall, one way or the other, whether it be on this campus or move it to Town Center. And the point is, though, I think that what we have to do is, I just got to be careful with my words here, because quite frankly, I'm a little taken back by the timing, the process, the communication, and the perceptions of what we're doing and how we're doing this. This came out basically the week after, we voted on the budget. And I think a lot of us may have been, surprised by it and, to that degree. I know there has been discussions at our retreats and everything about the possibility of this type of move. But once again, as I stated before, there is a communication problem where the missing ingredient was explaining to the public why this is necessary to replace City Hall. I think among ourselves we kind of understand the problem, but here we're the public is going to see a presentation, without the benefit of the other options and things of that nature. And once again, in government, we're highly scrutinized these days. I think that's a bit of an understatement. And but once again, it's and I'm going to say this, and I may lose some friends. But the point is, though, it seems that with a lot of, we are a magnificently run city, but where sometimes we get into problems is the way that we do some of these public-private deals. And the thing is, once again, we have a perception among many that we don't have a level playing field in this city, and that we give, consideration to a list of small, select developers. And, a lot of this is founded in reality, and I think it's a thing that we have to take into consideration going forward. Once again, I think absent also is the discussion among council, giving direction as to whether going to Town Center should be an option. I think this has to be a council-driven thing, because once again, I think it's important that we engage the public and get some input on this. But the point is, though, once again, there has to be a compelling argument to make, because once again, when we think about parking, when we think about, are we going to have to put in a new Independence Exchange because the traffic is horrible there? Is parking going to be counterproductive? And my other major concern is that as we're desperate for tax revenue, why do we want to give up some of our most tax-rich yielding property in the city? And listen, I have confidence that Amada Hoffler, even if it doesn't come to fruition, they will come up with some other things that will be productive, that will allow town center to continue to grow and expand. But the point is, though, and I'm going to make a recommendation that even before we get, to the first meeting, that we as a council have a discussion to determine where we feel the direction should go, and the council should provide a little bit more direction in terms of what we want to do. But right now, I'm pretty uncomfortable taking this forward to the public, without a clear message from this body. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim Wood.
A couple of comments or points. I guess the first one is, something that Bobby said I agree with is, and I've asked for this several times, we've not done a good job of explaining to the public why this is necessary. And frankly, a lot of people that I talk to think this is just a meeting place for the council as some gilded cage for us. And that's unfortunate, because there are many employees who work in this building every day, and they're citizens who come to this building. So I think that's something that needs to be a component of however this moves forward, is a robust campaign to explain, first off, the condition of the existing building, the services that are provided from this building to the citizens, and frankly, the justification for the additional square footage that will be created by constructing a new building and then having 70,000 square feet of additional space here. And from my perspective, that has not been done, and that really needs to be done before we do anything else. From a logistical standpoint, I guess this question's from Mark. This is considered an unsolicited PPEA, correct?
Well, they've asked that it be considered an unsolicited PPEA. The local government has the decision as to whether or not to accept it, and the first step would be to ensure that all of the requirements contained in your policy were met, and I believe there are still some additional pieces of information that would need to be included.
Okay, so then if we do consider this an unsolicited PPEA, then the council needs to vote to accept it or not.
Well, you can give direction. It's actually the manager's ability to accept it, but I think he has indicated he would take this council's direction on whether or not to accept it.
Then we determine the amount of time, because Dave said 60 days, and I
Well,
think that's nowhere near enough time for
The
that.
policy says that if the council, if the city accepts an unsolicited proposal, it must post that proposal and solicit competing proposals within 10 days. And then the policy says that there shall be a minimum of 60 days for competing proposals to be submitted, but you can choose to make that period longer if you believe it beneficial to do so.
Okay, so then the next step, just again logistically, is that you're going to have to review what's been submitted, figure out whether or not it qualifies as a PPEA under our guidelines. And then, but you're saying that does not come back to us, that goes, the manager handles that, or?
Well,
Because it seems to me the other ones we've done,
it's.
the council has done.
Well, the manager has brought it to you and you have given direction to the manager, but the policy contemplates and the state law contemplates that the manager can accept the conceptual proposal and post it. But I don't know of a situation where that has happened, where this body has not given him direction.
Okay.
That's your intent.
Absolutely.
I figured.
Just confirming that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Jim?
And Councilman Wood, I would follow on your questions and pose one for the city attorney. There are really two approaches to moving forward that PPA. Would you address that, Mark? Please.
The policy contemplates either the acceptance of an unsolicited PPEA or the actual affirmative solicitation of a PPEA proposal. You can craft your own proposal and say to someone who's expressed interest, in this case, Ramada Hoffler, submit your proposal back in response to our solicitation, or you can say to Armada Hoffler, here are the things that you need to modify or include in your proposal so it will comply as an unsolicited proposal, which can then be accepted and then competing proposals solicited. So it can go, your policy contemplates that it can be addressed either way.
Okay, so then based on that, if I can, Mr. Mayor, so then we can say it's going to be X number of days. no less than 60, but some other number of days. So in theory, if we were to say 120 days or something like that, that would give us time that would allow us, in theory, to continue with this discussion, the outreach, but also to get a little bit more explanation and basically things I talked about before in terms of the condition of the existing building, what's done here, and that sort of thing, so.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Bobby. You wanna
a
follow
quick
up?
question. Would the land swap require a supermajority vote?
I believe the land is held by the VBDA, so no.
Hey, John Moss.
A couple of things. One, which I shared with the mayor way back when this first came up. We are a resort community. This is when people go on vacation. And now something that we're told is one of the most momentous decisions that this body would make. And we're trying to go out and engage the people when at that time of the year when they're out trying to do everything but be civically engaged. So I sometimes, those two things, most momentous decision we were making since the light rail thing was rejected, thank goodness. But since that we're making, and we're asking people to engage that when they're the least attentive for good reasons. So I think the timing is wrong. But probably the timing is wrong for the reasons that both Bobby and I think Jim suggested was there's a lot of things I think that we need to discuss among ourselves to include the acquisition strategy itself. I think your point was well taken. If there's not a majority of people who are interested in going to town center, it isn't worth a lot of effort to be spending all that public engagement on something for which there's not a critical mass even to consider. We haven't had that discussion yet. We could go out with the PPPA to ask for building at that site, building at this site. We could have different ways of looking at that. We haven't had anyone here who's really spoke from an advocacy point of view. Certainly special interests today were well represented, but no one spoke for the advocacy of just the intangible civic nature and civic pride and all the historical things and the intangibles that represent the municipal center. No one has talked to that aspect, the intangible of community pride, the non-sterile architecture that we have here. And, and I can't think of one in the country where people have said, you look at these places you talk about, but those cities and town halls grew up with the city itself. And so we're trying to artificially do something that the marketplace hasn't said. But I think that's the discussion, Mr. I think we got to be having, is that one before we go out and engage the public. I think you're right about why the space, because I've had people ask me that, and I've kind of, having done a lot of moves with government, you got to, how many cubes you have, a number of people, so you can start explaining, you need more conference rooms or a new facility, you need to be allowing for VTC and all these things. But the same token, because of technology, also pushing people, they don't have to come to City Hall to get services. So where it's located is irrelevant, because you push the knowledge and decision-making to where the customer is. They don't have to come where the computer is. And so we have to have that discussion and make sure that that fits in with the long-term, where we see the very nature of service delivery and electronic delivery and what's really being accomplished. And I think we should be bringing people here to show this complex. I think it's under-marketed, if you had to ask me. And so, but I think that the bigger point, though, is a lot more discussion among us, I think, so that we may at the end disagree, that may happen, but at least we'll then agree what we're trying to get out there in front of the public, and we'll understand and can talk to them about why it's this many square feet, why we have to do it now. We might want to still be in this building when it's done renovated. The DOD moved back into the Pentagon. They didn't build another building for 24,000 people. They phased it and moved people back in. There was a reason why they did that. So I think we need to understand why we're moving. And just to make money, if that's the reason, that's certainly one part of it. But we have to remember all that property tax goes into the TIF, not into the unrestricted general fund, unless we're sunsetting the TIF itself. That'd be an interesting discussion. But I think it's more than money when you talk about where our history and where our government has been. It's more than just, there's an intangible here which I think was underrepresented today.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, may I make 2 comments?
Please, go step on up.
There's only 2 things in that, quite frankly, only two things that were mentioned that I have any domain in commenting on, and so I'll respect the council for that. And maybe useful as you have your discussions that will obviously ensue. The first is on the value of the real estate and using it for certain purposes as opposed to others. We have a lot of experience with mixed-use developments and public-private partnerships, 24 of them or so in the 40 years of history of the company. And from that experience, I can tell you that the whole goal is we can always go vertical. The value of the real estate that in fact does go vertical on the private side, that value exists because you do things like performing arts centers and plazas and green space and city halls and the synergy it creates, et cetera. So in our view, it's not a bad use of valuable real estate. It's the very uses that make all the rest of the private real estate exceptionally valuable and throw off those tax revenues. So I would just share that perspective from the private side in our experience. So I appreciate your time on that. The other thing I'd like to mention is just I heard the comment back and forth. It sounds like a appropriate discussion on where all the places City Hall could be. Our perspective is simply we think we have a mechanism to attach $100 million of additional development on the site we've proposed, and that's really summarizes why we think it's an option that ought to be part of the dialogue. So again, I appreciate your time and thank you for the follow-up
Thank you very
time.
much. All right, we'll move on now. Liaison reports.
We did get an announcement from the executive director of the planning district that the region is back in Uwasi. Did you see that email?
Right?
Which I think is great news.
Yes, ma'am. A lot of effort from the PDC. Yes,
Let
ma'am.
everybody know that we now are eligible, the region will be getting this money that we used to get to put on emergency preparedness issues, because we had been dropped out for a time, and the planning district and the whole region together worked hard on getting that back in, so.
Great.
Is that the funding for the HRMM or
Yeah.
Metropolitan Strike Team? Because I know their funding was cut. That's good.
All right, other liaison reports? Yes, ma'am?
The Human Rights Commission held the state convention again this past weekend, and the Minority Business Council is having their strategic planning retreat this Friday.
Right, thank you very much. Any other liaison reports? Comments? Mr. Earn and then Mr. Mullis.
Mr. Mayor, two quick things. One, we finished up Sunday our 9th Warrior Week. Very successful. Y'all may remember last year we hosted 530 wounded warriors and their families, and this year we don't have the final numbers, but it's over 600. And if it's all right with the council, at some point in the next month or so, I'd like to have somebody come in and just give us a really quick summary of how many we actually did and what the events were. But it was a really successful weekend.
Well, can I don't mean to, but first I want to compliment John and the people down there. I was really proud of our city. I think everyone at this table has been very proud of our city last weekend, showing the support for the wounded veterans and the support for our military. I mean, folks, and I hope you appreciate the way I responded. These individuals would come up and say, we appreciate what you are doing for us. And I corrected them. No, don't appreciate, don't tell us you appreciate us. We thank you and we honor you for what you've done. And I tell you, it brings tears in your eyes when you saw what was going on, and to see some of these people that are still in hospitals, out on surfboards, where John was a big part of getting that surfing done for these patriots. And then to see the families, these individuals with their children out there. It was something that will just sit back and say to you, everyone at this table should be very proud of the part the city played this weekend. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with those comments as well. In addition to that, Mr. Mayor, today is the first day for the seismic comment period for offshore drilling. And it's open for 30 days. It'll actually, all the comments will close on the 7th of July, so it's coming up here pretty fast. And as you know, many years ago, we had a council-supported position that was pro-offshore drilling, which the council was kind enough to agree with me to go ahead and go to a neutral position. But I think it's fair to note that, we are probably one of the only coastal communities on the East Coast that does not have a position on offshore drilling. And we've heard from a lot of people in our community, including the RAC, the Hotel Association, the Restaurant Association, the Windhaven River Now, the State Tourism Association, the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Management Council, the Virginia Beach Garden Club, the Green Ribbon Committee. And we've also heard, which has been a little bit of a change from our military as well. And there's been a lot of changes since their original position in 2010, which kind of carved out some places that were that they felt were going to be okay for offshore drilling. Their most recent report actually states that the current assessment reflects new mission requirements, including expanded weapon and sensor footprint and operational concerns, which really the subtext there is that to put offshore drilling potentially off the coast of our shores could interfere with their mission. So I'm going to work with the city's attorney's office in the next week to draft a resolution for consideration for the council that we may come out and have a formal position that would be against offshore drilling. I will share that with everyone for your comments and to see if we can come up with some wording that would be agreeable to, hopefully to everybody, but certainly to the majority of us, and also be looking for co-sponsors for that as well, sir.
Thank you very much. John Moss.
On Monday of this week, the Environment and Energy Study Institute hosted a day-long seminar on the environment and sea level rise from a national security perspective. The former General of Combat Air Command at Langley, a number of people who are involved in the theory were speakers at this event, and they talked about Hampton Roads, Norfolk, and Virginia Beach quite often, and that wasn't the only thing they talked about, but a lot. And Mr. Manager, the site they cited, which you might be able to get maybe a connection or get a transcript link, I haven't checked it out yet, is eesi.org. But this gets back to this thing I know I had asked about earlier of looking, and maybe just the area where Jessica's expertise would be great, but looking at what people are facing in terms of as we go to an actuarially sound flood insurance program, and I know we're working on the discount piece, but what people are looking at in terms of the rise in their real estate, rise in their flood insurance premiums, and what effect that will have, it's something Jerry can, in terms of the attractiveness and therefore the real estate upward growth of those properties, because in some cases you heard some demonstrative changes between 1,800, 3,000, and that's clearly going to materially change property growth valuations. And so I think we really need to understand, I know that's done by census tract, but what are those current FEMA premiums, because it's a national thing, it's not specific, by those census tracts, and what is that, if it's a 16, 25% growth rate over the next 5 years, what you're saying, what is that? And what does that translate to in terms of reduced buying power that impacts on that price? These are accessible things, and I think we need to understand that as we look at our upcoming 5-year forecast. We need to be appreciative of that, and that's my comment.
Thank you. Jessica, and then we'll wind up.
I just wanted to make mention, I got the opportunity to participate in Clean the Bay Day this past weekend. Wasn't my first time participating, but it was my son's first time participating, and he had a really great time. And then thankfully Bobby and I hooked up, and I got to read the proclamation at the volunteer picnic, and I haven't gotten the final numbers yet from Dan Baxter, but I just wanted to give a shout out to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, the Virginia Beach Clean Community Commission for all the hard work that they did organizing, and it was really cool and really fun to be a part of it again this year.
They do a great job every year on that, don't they? They really do. All right, can we move on? Okay, I'm saying everything's on consent. Might have a few no votes, but everything can go on consent? Huh?
Pull item 3.
First ordinance, everybody okay with it?
May I just ask a question to clarify in my mind? In this first example of the exemption of real estate property taxes for surviving spouses of first responders, there's a limitation of up to the what is it
The
called?
average or
Yeah,
median.
median average. But when we look over at the later one for disabled veterans, it doesn't mention that it has that caveat.
You're absolutely correct, and that is done by the General Assembly. The median household piece has not come in until the second and third program. So it's not there for disabled vets. It is there for surviving spouse of those that are killed in the line of duty to the first responders. And it's also there for those that were killed, if you will, in a hostile military setup. So when the General Assembly did the first one, they didn't include that sort of cap, if you will, on the value of the exemption. But in the second two, they did. And it's just what the General Assembly gives us.
So with the disabled veterans, it's all of it, no matter how much. And is it specified that the veterans are disabled because of their military service, or is it just general
Totally permanent service connected.
service connected?
That's
Because
correct.
it
And the
doesn't make that
DoD
plain.
does all the paperwork there. On this one, it is all done by the line of duty kind of infrastructure.
I think it's actually the Veterans Administration that does the determination. DOD provides information, but I think VA actually makes the determination.
But that's on consent then, folks?
All right, item 2, John, I think you're abstaining on A, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I have a letter to submit.
And B is, everybody else okay with those? Item 3, we've got speakers on item 3.
Also, there's a new thing
Yeah.
that was just put out.
And there's an amended ordinance as far as the compensation of the city manager that clarifies the differences between what the benefits were for our previous city manager versus the current city manager. And everybody's received a copy of that, I believe. So we'll have to pull item 3. 4 and on, anybody have any comments on any of those? All right. And if we go to the planning items, there is a correction, I understand, on the item K1C. Somebody here can explain that to the council.
Certainly, the important correction to note is in condition 1, the correct plan is now identified in that condition.
Yes, I didn't follow you. I'm sorry, I'm slow. Condition 1.
Hey, Carol.
Certainly, sorry about that. Condition 1 now references the correct plan for the Great Neck Road
Oh, okay.
project.
All right, got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so LaRoe Tucker and Doswell Ventures LLC, items A, B, and C. Recommendation is for approval. Everybody okay?
I just had a quick question. All of these have operated as a gas station / convenience store, right?
Many, many years.
That's what I thought, okay. I had an email on it, and I just wanted to make sure that that was the case.
Okay, item 2, city ordinance establish historic and cultural and amend the official zoning map. Everybody okay?
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Mayor. The chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions from open meetings allowed by section 2.2-3711 Code of Virginia as submitted for the following purposes: publicly held property, discussion and consideration of the acquisition of real property for the public purpose or of the disposition of publicly held property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to section 2.2-3711A3 Beach District. I'm going to go with that because that's going to take all your time.
I just wanted to clarify.
Second. Call the roll, please. Jessica?
Jessica, vote.
Here, sorry, present.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. That's what I thought. I just
Aye.
wanted to be, I more wanted it for the record. Sorry.
Aye.
But like I said,
Aye.